Oh, I lost my vote. Shoot.
You're still there, John.
Oh, I'm
I
still there.
still see
Okay.
you.
Just quiet. I thought I
I
couldn't
s-
hear anything.
no.
Okay, I'm going to start recording.
Okay,
Okay.
we're all good.
Yes.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone, or good morning. Dave, I called the March Guam Board of Accountancy meeting to order. Uh, Present are board members, myself, Sean Phillips, Taling Taitano, Jenny Chu, and Francis Baba. Before we begin, let's just reconfirm that the meeting has been properly noticed, and I believe it's been posted in the Guam Daily Post 2 times on Thursday, March 13, and again on March 18, Tuesday. So properly noticed, and so we can proceed with the meeting. The first item would be minutes from the last month's meeting,
Right.
which was February 20.
Move to approve subject to correction.
I'll second.
Seconded by Sean. Thanks, Tarling. So minutes are approved, subject to any corrections. So the next, I didn't notice anything really major there other than the general discussions, but next item is the, Dave, you want to do old business?
Yeah, we'll do the old business.
Okay, we'll talk about the Endowment Foundation update.
Yeah. Yeah, the endowment fund is now showing a balance as of the end of February. Well, the middle of March was 5,482,000. So it had gone down a little bit. Of course, the 13,000 in fees was taken out for the last quarter of last year, but the end of February was 5,633,000. And in the 2 weeks, it dropped down to the 5,482,000. So, the market's still going up and down, but we're still ahead of the game. We're showing the performance year to date as of the end of February was 1.65%. And Lord knows what it'll be by the time we reach the end of the year. But compared to last year was 10%, the year before 15%. Of course, the years before that was a big drop. So it's still up and down, but we're still at 5.482, essentially 5.5 million. So, and when we contribute our additional 200,000 for this fiscal year, we'll be at 5.7 million, more or less. So we did have some investment changes during the month of February. So you can see they had the 13,000 in fees was taken out, and for the last quarter, that was back in December, January. Then we had some, then we had some investment. The recap here is summary of gains and losses. They had some investment sales and purchases, so we had some short and long-term gain and loss, which the net effect of which was basically 15.5 a net gain year to date for the first 2 months. So we're, par for the course, hanging in there. I don't see any real issues with that. That's basically all I have on the fund. I understand that Dr. Jones had invited one of the professors, I think from Gonzaga. Was a guy I met at NASBA, and I sent her his CV, and she and Martha have been talking to him, and he had expressed interest to come to Guam for the last several years, but basically he says he's in the middle of some personal issues that's going to preclude that. But he did make a recommendation to Martha and Dr. Jones for somebody who could take his place. So I
Mhm.
haven't heard anything from Martha about that yet, or Dr. Jones, but I presume they're pursuing that. They wanted somebody to teach for a summer term with data analytics and auditing. So he
Okay,
did
so
recommend
David looks like
somebody
no Billy
who's
Moorhead.
no Billy at this point. No.
Okay.
So, but they're looking around to see who they can, find. But I think that we could wind up having somebody for the summer term. Whether they come to Guam or not, I don't know. I know that they were thinking about having them teach for the master's course, which of course is all online, so they could do that from wherever. Wouldn't necessarily need to come to Guam for the summer, but I don't have any more update on that yet. I know Martha was contacted by the person that was recommended as a replacement, so I presume they're pursuing that. I have to wait and see if I can find out any more in the next week or so.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody have any questions about the fund or the visiting professor program?
Well, this is somewhat connected. So we do have one pending session from Edward Conrad, right? And I think Tolling's working with Dr. Conrad on that date. Tolling,
Right.
it sounds
That's
like he's going to
correct.
propose a date by March 31st or March
No.
28th.
No, we have a date. I can't remember which date we tied to. I'll look back.
Okay.
What he hasn't done was he hasn't provided a topic. So he said by
Oh,
the
okay.
25th, he'll have a topic and then Jason can work to put the announcement together.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah,
that's good.
I saw an email come through from Dr. Conrad, but I didn't get a chance to take a look at the details yet. So.
Yeah, I was just following up because he said that he would get to back to us on the topic he would cover, but he hadn't yet. So he said he'd do it by the 25th.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that would be his last obligation to us, right?
Right.
So that
Right. It's a 4-hour.
no more free sessions. No more free sessions
Yep.
until we get another visiting professor.
No, if we want him next time, we'll have to pay for it. So, although I think he'd be happy to
Okay.
do it for. I think he'd be happy to do it for a dinner or something. So, I don't think he's really into CPE for money. Who knows?
Okay.
Okay. Anyway, we can move on then to the
Move on
new
to the
licenses.
licenses. Okay.
Yeah.
So it looks
think
like
we
we just
have,
have two Guam, I guess, renewals, or reinstatements, is that we call it.
Right,
Okay.
right. Ed and regional medical center, Ed's reinstating, and then Randy Wagon also. Randy's a little farther down, so there's I think there's 59 total.
So Dave, a question. So these reinstatements, so they've caught up with all their required CPE.
Correct. They have to complete the 120 hours of CPE before they. Well, it has to be completed when they apply for reinstatement. They have to have already completed the 120 hours, within the last 3 years. So.
Okay. And then they meet all the required types. Okay.
Right. No. In Ed's case, he's reinstating active tests because he wasn't. He was delinquent, but not for too long of a period. So he's having a test license. But in Randy's case, it was quite a while, and he just decided to reinstate, but with an active non-attest. So.
Okay.
I think all total there's I think 59. So Randy decided to go reinstate with a non-attest, which means he wasn't subject to having to get additional auditing, CPE and stuff like that. If you've been inactive or basically canceled for more than 3 years or 5 years, and you wanted a test license, we typically make you take additional auditing CPE or commit to providing a pre-issuance review if you're going to be doing audits. So that's one of the questions we asked about reinstatement. So I don't think that's an issue. Most of I should say us older CPAs on Guam are more interested in just having the license as a non-attest license. We're not interested in doing auditing today. It's a whole lot more complicated process than it used to be. So total we have 59 new licensees. And there were
Okay,
57
decent.
and 2 reinstatements. So
Move to approve.
Second.
Second by Francis. Okay, thank you. So
Thank you.
applications for certifications and licenses are approved.
Okay, the next item we have is general discussion for the CPA exam fee notification. This came from, I think Bill Emmer wrote it, but recently the new EVP for Ops for NASMA. But essentially the bottom line is that the AICPA and the NASMA fees for 2026 are going to stay the same as they are right now, 2025. The Prometric fee goes up about 1.12%, so not very much. The section fee goes up $2.73. And the security fee goes up 20 cents. So we're going to not quite $3 per section. And today, if you take the take the 3 core courses in one discipline, 4 sections, you're looking at a little bit less than $1,100 for the test fees. So, and then typically most people will take 1 or 2 sections twice before they pass. So if you take 6 sections, you're looking at right around $1500 to $1,600 for 6 sections in order to pass. It's not the increase is not that much this year anyway. So that's just for information purposes for documentation.
So Dave, you said, sorry, you're roughly around 1,100 or less to sit for all 4 parts.
For 4 sections, yeah.
Sorry,
For
4
3
sections.
3
Okay.
core and 1 discipline. Yeah. Each section is the exact same amount because they're all now the exact same duration, 4 hours each.
But it could be additional costs depending on where you take the exam if you're out of state, right?
Right. Well,
okay.
if you're international, they assess the international candidate fee if you're testing in an international location. And that's a little bit of a hefty fee, but the way I understand that fee is that international administration fee covers the cost of AICPA and NASBA and Prometric dealing with the ins and outs of the intricacies of providing, privacy and data privacy and security of testing questions and things in a foreign country. Because each one is different, and they have to abide by all the laws of the country. So, that's what the international admin fee is designed to cover, those additional costs.
Okay, and of course Guam is not international, and our candidates who take it here, of course, don't pay anything additional.
Right. At this point, Guam is considered a domestic U.S. location, number one. So there's no international admin fee, but there has been a Guam surcharge, which was, a function of the contract between the board and NASBA and Prometric for the test center.
Okay, that's our charge. Okay.
And that surcharge part of that went to us, the board, and part of it went to NASBA to cover the cost of operating the test center. And for our Guam candidates, we waived the board's portion of the fee. So our Guam candidates did not pay for any surcharge fee to take the exam here. So that's the existing situation.
Okay.
So could
Okay.
change in the future. Okay. Any more questions about the exam fees?
None for me.
Okay, if not, I'll move into the NASBA quarterly communications, which is essentially the copies of the board meeting minutes. So the January 24, January 24, 2025 meeting in Puerto Rico. I'll just cover this briefly because it's there for the reading, but NASBA Representative Bill Blinn was appointed to the Governmental Accounting Standards Advisory Council, which is a good thing, I guess. The new president, Dan Dustin, provided a status update on diagnostic review being conducted by the outside party. John, that's the interview by the consultant they hired that they wanted us
okay.
to, the 90-minute telephone interview. I don't know if you had yours yet or not, but I think you're scheduled for one and I am. But
I already had mine.
Okay.
Earlier this week, I think.
So is it far-ranging questions or?
No, he had a series of questions. He was open and honest, just trying to basically asking, what we felt about NASBA, what we could do different, what we would like to change, what were their strengths, what were their weaknesses, this typical stuff. Open to anything, any comments. Of course, anyone in particular, anybody, any concerns. So I ended up speaking with him for the whole time, at least an hour, surprisingly.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, of course, I did
they
focus
first
and said,
wanted
but I said that they should, whoever, they just need to ensure that, of course, every jurisdiction is different sizes, so they have to consider the needs of the various jurisdictions. Some initiatives may not be applicable to us, and although it may be relevant to others, but just to treat essentially all of us as I guess equals in a sense.
Yeah, this is a consultant that Dan Dustin hired through the board, the NASBA board, just to get a feel for how NASBA was viewed by the boards and their commitment to mission, et cetera, et cetera. I think he's just trying to get a kind of a status baseline since his takeover from Ken Bishop is only since last August. So I think that's supposed to conclude sometime in the next month or sometime in May, I guess. Well, we should probably hear about it in the regional meeting. So, okay. Then Bill Hemmer again, the new VP Ops, he reported on the status of information technology projects, with the biggest of which is the new CPA mobile application they're developing for exam candidates. They've got a few other things in the pipeline, but that's the most important thing, I think, at this point. They're trying to get a mobile app on the phones and tablets out to all the candidates so they can do a lot of the things they have to do now online on the web through their phones because, of course, everybody has one and that's what they're most familiar with using. So then Colleen Conrad announced that the Triad, I guess, NASBA, AICPA, and Prometric had signed a new contract for the exam, for delivering the exam and the candidate database, et cetera, et cetera. And the finance committee said that the operations budget was ahead of the game by $300,000 in the first 4 months of fiscal 25, even though revenue was less than budget, so were expenses. then their capital expenses were primarily the expense involved with the CPA mobile application development, but their investment income was 2.4 million. So I don't think NASBA is getting any poorer at this point. They seem to be doing well. So the executive directors committee, Nancy Glenn is in charge, and she's given a full recap of what's been the concerns of all the executive directors through the calls we have, which of course is exposure to pathways, mobility, having effective communications, and then the interest we have around the alternative practice structures and employee stock ownership plans. We haven't had any real issues with that here in Guam, as far as I know. We haven't had any firms taken over by private equity investors at this point. But that's really it's beginning to happen in more and more states. They have some firms that want to go into ESOPs, and some private equity investors that want to take over and split firms up between, the auditing arm and the non-auditing services. And they're trying to, some states have some very strict requirements about the fact that the firm owner has to be I don't know what the legal term is, but essentially a human person. Can't be a company or another LLC or a non-living person. You have to be a live person. So some of them have some very strict rules about things like that. And then when these companies or the firms try to make a change in this ownership structure, they have a really hard time getting relicensed and things. So we haven't had that issue at this point, but I think we're going to hear more about it, and the UAA's committee, I think, is working on some kind of proposed language to help accept it. I can't remember the two states, but one or two states has dealt with it already, and I think they felt like they, came out even in the process. So I'm not sure exactly which ones they are. I just heard about the last director ED call last week, but going forward, I think we'll find something that comes out in the UAA about it. The other thing is that the CPT Center for Public Trust students will be attending the Eastern Regional meeting this year, which is in Philadelphia. Every year they change they have their National Leadership Conference through the Center for the Public Trust, and they bring the chapter presidents. I think there's two people from each chapter that they bring to the meeting, and they alternate the meetings between the Eastern region and the Western region for NASBA to give the kids a chance to come and attend the meeting and see what it's like, meet people, and make some presentations. It's very good for the kids. UOG has a CPT chapter, and I think they've had their students go now for, I think it's at least 3 to 4 years, right, John? We met two of them in one of the regional meetings. Yeah. And then Colleen Conrad has decided she's retiring.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So she's being replaced by Wendy Garvin. Wendy is the former executive director for the Tennessee Board of Accountancy.
Wendy Gardner. Okay.
And Garvin, Garvin, and she's very good. I mean, I've worked with her for what now? I don't know how many years as an executive director, and she's been with Tennessee for quite a while. And she's been with other professional organizations before that, and I think she does a really good job. So she's smart, she's quick. I don't know if she's a CPA or not. I'm not sure, but I think she'll do a very good job. And so she's been designated to replace Colleen on her retirement. So I'll scroll down now for basically this October meeting is just a little bit more in terms of details relative to what was recapped in the January meeting. But One of the things here is that Wendy Garvin coming to NASBA as Colleen's replacement. She was replaced by Nicole Casson of South Dakota, and Nicole's been the ED there for at least 10 or 15 years. And she takes Wendy's former position on the AICPA Board of Examiners. And Nicole is a good replacement. Nicole's been on several committees with me, the CBT admin committee and the executive director committee before. And she's a smart kid too. I say kid, but she's kid to me anyway. But she's very capable. I think she'll do a good job there too. The only other things I want to cover here is that when Dan Dustin reported on the summit meeting held with the AICPA leadership, that's where they discussed the Section 5 and 23 amendments for the Uniform Accountancy Act that basically focusing on automatic mobility. And then the mutual recognition agreements, NASBA and the AICPA together both decided that the MRA with the Institute of Chartered Accountants in Scotland was going to be allowed to lapse. And they're still talking with the England and Wales Institute, but they haven't decided what they're going to do yet on that one. So, and then again, continuing to leverage technology to provide information to the member boards through webinars. So they've been having a few of those. Executive Ethics Committee. The peak of the AICPA is going to meeting in they met last November to discuss the exposure draft for private equity, and I think that's going to come out pretty soon if it hasn't already. The other thing that Bill Emmer talked about with basically the IT developments that they have is besides the mobility application for the candidates, is the new charts and things in the books they finally published to catch up the reports for the the candidate performance books that they previously published, and a few other things. They hired a new data analytics guy, and he's in charge of developing all these things, so that's why some of our reports have gotten a little bit better in terms of overall data, but I'm not sure how effective they are in terms of using them to manage. But when we get the candidate performance books that breaks everything down by schools and universities and things, I usually give them to UOG. I give them to Martha at UOG so she can use them to evaluate their whatever they need to do. That's worked okay so far. And then they're still doing the experience, earn and learn thing, which is going on, and the change to allow people to register that are not working for a firm that's registered. They can register individually without being tied to a firm. But then they're also talking about one of the things they're looking at with a new pilot program with CPE sponsors. And then the pilot program they're looking at now also with the transcript reviews is how to streamline the process of tier 1 university transcript reviews. And they're doing a pilot with 7 states. What I'm not sure about at this point with that is what they consider tier 1. And I'm thinking that tier 1 is the highest level of accreditation that's previously described in the UAA, meaning that they're like the actual program itself, the accounting program itself is accredited, rather than tier 2, which would be the business school is accredited, and tier 3 where the college is accredited. So That's the only thing I can think of in terms of streamlining a transcript review, because the assumption is that if you're a tier one accreditation, or the accounting program itself, specifically the program is accredited, then we're not supposed to have to really review the transcript for required courses and things like that. The assumption is that it's provided based on the accreditation of the program itself. So, but I'm not always sure that that's a good thing. So I guess they're looking at it. We'll find out more details probably in the upcoming regional meetings. Other than that, most of the rest of this is just the same stuff that was recapped more briefly. This is a little more details. According to the CPT, there's 6,000 students nationwide are enrolled in their ethical leadership certification program, which I was curious how many they had. Didn't know they had 6,000. That's pretty good. And then again, the fiscal 2024 NASBA's operating excess revenues was 4.4 million. So, like I said, they're not doing too bad. And this was driven primarily by higher exam-related revenue related to score timing of score releases, where we thought it was going to be longer and it was shorter. So, and then they had actual investment income of 6 million. So. NASBA's not doing too bad, no matter how much they whine about the expenses of their scholarships for people to come to meetings. I have no sympathy for them financially. The rest of it, I'm just going to scroll through, but it's kind of the same thing. The relations of member board, again, is discussing substantial equivalency, mobility, and the UA changes relative and alternative practice structure. And the Legislative Support Committee has been passionate about the desire to create a resource for state boards facing consolidation. So they're working on a white paper that explains why it's an advantage to a state or a jurisdiction to have a dedicated executive director versus many jurisdictions now that are consolidated, where the executive director handles 3 or 4 or 5 boards, or in some cases even more. Like, the cosmetology, the boxing, the funeral directors, they have one person handling all of that, which means not much of anything gets done except to keep the licenses rolling. That's it. There are a number of jurisdictions that suffer from that. They did have the policy discussions on the private equity ESOP thing, and some of the board members apparently have been part of a firm which had gone through the process. So I think that added some fuel to the fire of the discussion to get something done about it. And then the UAA is also considering the current definition of a test, and does it need to be revised to expand the scope. I have nothing further to say about that. I'm not sure there's what's behind that, but something must be. And then they had discussions about the exposure draft that didn't go over so well, and the revision to the UAA for the new pathways. So, and then there's a discussion on the topic of automatic mobility and the importance of public protection and substantial equivalency. So, that's basically about it. And if we go, unless anybody has any questions, we'll go to the next one, which is the proposed UAA exposure draft for the changes. And these are the changes that are designed to enact the new pathway. So they'll have 3 pathways instead of 2. And this is a result of the fact that the previous exposure draft of the competency pathway didn't go over so well. It has a lot of practical limitations in the implementation, which discouraged it. So this is kind of what they came up with. So in the preface to this UAA recommended language change, the two key themes emerged from the submissions on the competency pathway. One was that the strong desire to have an additional pathway to licensure and the broad support for individual-based mobility. Basically, they're saying that of all the comment evaluations, they came up with the 4 things that were recommendations from distilling the comments was to specify the educational requirements to sit, define the requirements for an additional licensure pathway, transition from mobility based on state substantial equivalency to a model predicated on individual licensing criteria, and encourage the adoption of mobility through an individual practice privilege. So that boiled down to the exposure draft establishing 3 ways to licensure. One is the original post-baccalaureate degree, being master's or whatever, with an accounting concentration, 1 year of experience in passing the CPA exam. The second one, which has always kind of been there, which is the baccalaureate degree with accounting concentration and 30 additional hours, which is equivalent to the post-baccalaureate degree without the degree being conferred. 1 year of experience in the CPA exam. So essentially the same thing. The 150 hours is what it is. And the third pathway, which is the same one we had up until 2020-21, which is the baccalaureate degree with accounting concentration, 2 years of experience in it. So it's just the old pathway with a new, I don't know, a little bit of lipstick on it, maybe. I don't know how you really want to describe it, but to me, it's the same thing we had before.
Yeah.
Before we, were pushed into adopting the 150. So, and they're saying that one of the things about this is that it permits candidates holding baccalaureate degrees with accounting to sit for the exam. It's the same stuff we've been doing essentially. So, in that sense, the only thing that's changing is the UAA recommended language. It has not changed anything we haven't been doing, adding anything we haven't been doing.
Dave, no change to the types of experience, right? It just says experience.
No, yeah, I'm going to get to the detail of that here, which
okay.
They talk about including provisions to facilitate individual practice privileges and a safe harbor for legacy. Of course, everybody's grandfathered in, right? But the bottom line is the changes they're making is just to specify the 3 things. The one is the post-baccalaureate, with the education and accounting determined by the board. Same thing with the baccalaureate, 30 hours, which is 150 hours. Accounting concentration determined by the board, and the baccalaureate degree with 2 years experience, and the education is determined by the board. So the one thing they're saying here is where if you're enrolled in a dual degree program where you get the bachelor's at or after the master's, you can sit for the exam whenever. Well, we take care of that by our pre-completion education rules. So, and then they define the experience requirement. They wiped out all the previous stuff and basically said, as an applicant under, the previous section A or B, which is the master's degree or the 150 hours degree, you only have to have 1 year experience. And if you're under the baccalaureate degree, you have to have 2 years experience. Then they just basically repeated the experience of any type of service or advice representing the skills needed. The time of licensure to serve public and involves accounting, attest, compilation, management, financial, tax, or consulting skills. And this is the real changes, all of which was verified by a licensee, meeting requirements defined by board rule. Experience acceptable, gains or employment in government, industry, academia, or public. The only real change is this little highlight down here at the bottom where it says the experience may be supervised by a non-licensee, but must be verified by a licensee.
What
In
is
the
that?
current,
Okay.
well, what they're
Experience
removing is the fact that previously and in our current existing law, the experience has to be supervised by a
Yeah,
licensed
CPA.
CPA, an actively licensed CPA. So they're saying, well, you can get the experience, you can be supervised by a non-licensee, but a licensee has to verify that you got the experience. So I'm not sure that's a good thing.
Yeah, it might be
Because
because there are fewer and fewer licensed CPAs.
in
Maybe it's
private
getting harder.
practice or in
Yeah.
government, yeah, so for sure. So it's like, I mean, when I was working at Florida State before I even got my license, um, I could work for the university in the internal audit department, but my experience wouldn't count unless my supervisor was a licensed CPA. So same thing is, and that's what's in our existing law. So effectively speaking, that's the only thing that's really changing in terms of the way our law
Okay.
reads, other than the fact that they reinstated the old pathway that we had to get rid of to go to 150. So
Okay.
that's basically what's happening here. So and we can debate, the board can debate whether it wants to accept that change or not. But the other thing relative to practice privileges, they're basically saying that if your principal place of business is not in our state, but you have a valid license in good standing as a CPA from any other state, then you can come and practice in our state without getting a license, getting a Guam license, essentially. But um, the requirements they put down now, where it says here, you can practice. You shall have all the practice privileges of licensees of this state, meaning Guam to us, without the need to obtain a license under Section 6 or 7, provided that at the time of initial licensure, meaning when you got your initial license in your home jurisdiction, you were required to show evidence of having met the following requirements, which are the same thing: pass the exam, get the education, and get some experience. So what they're really saying is, what what I was arguing previously in some of the meetings that I went to was, especially with executive directors, is that even though everybody has a little bit of tweaked differences between their requirements in all the jurisdictions, there's no one jurisdiction that can stand up and say, mine's better than yours, so I won't accept your licensees. So effectively, that's what this is implementing, that same concept. Because when you talk to all the executive directors, none of them will tell you that they feel like they have the grounds for rejecting any CPA that's licensed, actively licensed in good standing in another jurisdiction, even though there's all these little minor differences in requirements. So, and that's essentially what this is. It plays to us in the terms of, it's termed individual mobility or practice privilege, which is fine. And this last little verb here is just grandfathering everybody as of December 24. But we still only accept individual mobility, which we've always, we enacted individual mobility, but not firm mobility. So if a firm wants to come to Guam and do a test work, they have to get a firm permit, period. So I don't think these changes in terms of individual mobility have any real effect on our current situation in terms of our law or our, policies and
Dave, I
practices.
have a question. So if there's a firm in the US that is doing the audit of a Guam entity 100% remote, they wouldn't need to have a license. in Guam,
Right.
would they? Okay.
Well, that there's been a question about that relative to the fact is the firm is the auditee, the firm being the company being audited, the client, is the client actually a Guam company or client that's resident in Guam, meaning say I have a business in Guam, and if I go and get an audit from a firm outside of Guam, they have to deliver the report to me in Guam, and I use it in Guam. Is there a requirement for them to come and get a license, to get a firm permit from Guam to be able to provide a test services to clients in Guam? There's always been some kind of, well, we've always kind of had the delineation between if the remote firm is, say, auditing a branch of a company that's headquartered somewhere else, then no, we don't require them to get a firm permit to do that. But if they're coming to actually audit a Guam client and provide the reports in Guam for use in Guam, then we've basically said, if you're going to come here and audit our Guam resident clients, like they're headquartered in Guam, then that's a
Yeah.
little
Okay.
different. So,
A little different. I mean,
I'm not
I
sure
guess
that,
essentially from a public protection point of view.
right. Yeah, it's kind of an up in the air issue, and I don't think you can, at this point, it's difficult to read the law specifically to say A, B, but that's always the way it's kind of been interpreted, at least in my understanding, that's the way we've always interpreted it. So, but we did have the requirement that, if you're going to offer your services via the internet, et cetera, you have to make sure that you have certain things on your website so anybody knows who they have to go to if they have a problem with you. So, that kind of thing. So, but at this point, I would say most of these UAA recommended changes don't really affect us in terms of our current practices or current law, other than reinstating the old pathway that we eliminated back in 2016 when we were pushed into going to 150. So, does anybody have any more questions about the UAA stuff?
Hey Dave, just a quick question on validation by a CPA of experience. Is there some sort of a relationship requirement? I mean, what does it mean
No.
to validate?
The way the law reads, it just basically says that your experience has to be verified by an actively licensed U.S. CPA.
Or verified?
Verified. So,
Yeah.
and what's happened in the way we've treated that in the past, and even today, is say for our foreign candidates, some of them have gotten experience, but not under a U.S. CPA, but under a licensed CPA in their own home jurisdiction. And they needed a U.S. CPA, so NASBA offers this service, and some people, argue that it's not good, but I don't see anything wrong with it. What happens is they provide a U.S. licensed CPA that goes through the due diligence process to look at the candidate's record of, experience, employers, and, that kind of thing. And then the person that's doing the verifying actually talks to the employers and tries to talk to the actual supervisor and determine exactly what they did do and that kind of thing. So they go through a due diligence process to say what were they doing? Was it bookkeeping, taxes, this or that? How much time did they spend on it? That kind of thing. How did they? I mean, just to determine that they actually did the work and got the experience, and then they sign off on it. There is also a provision in the UAA and in our law that says if you are, as an actively licensed CPA, if you are requested to sign off on an individual's experience
Mm-hmm.
and you refuse to do so, then you have to provide some reason for doing so, or you can be disciplined for not signing off. Essentially for refusing to sign off on the experience if somebody makes that request. I mean,
Okay,
presuming that
with the current law, there's a supervision requirement, right?
correct. The
Yeah,
current law requires you to be supervised by
by a CPA.
CPA. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but that would change
So,
under the proposed UAA.
right.
Yeah.
Under the new proposed language, that would change. Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm not all that sure we should change it, but given the state of affairs with, the number of CPAs available now, especially as we go forward, the more retirees we have, could get to be an issue. But, because a lot of firms may you may spend your first couple of years in a big firm now, especially in some of the bigger offices, working with the people that might be a supervisor that's not really licensed yet either,
Mhm.
that kind of thing. So in that sense, then, where are you going to be? I think that's part of what's motivating the change.
Okay. Well, I guess my question is, will there be something in the rules that sort of specify what's required in order to verify?
We haven't had anything specifically in the rules that address, how you verify it, but we have a form that gets filled out by everybody, and they have to detail out their experience and how much time they spent doing what and where, and with who and who was the supervisor, et cetera. And then they have to get people that attest to their moral character and things. And then
Yeah.
the girls tend to go through the process to verify the stuff.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
the ladies do. We could look at putting something in the rules about what's required to verify it. But at this point, our rules state the same thing as the existing UAA, which has to be verified by an actively licensed CPA. Okay.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions on the UAA stuff at this point? Or we just wait and see how the exposure draft comes out?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
I think it'll
Okay.
be almost unanimous. No, it won't be unanimous, but mostly accepted.
I'm pretty sure it'll be mostly accepted because it's pretty well what I think they're up to now 19 or 21 states that have enacted legislation to essentially restore the original bachelor's of 2-year experience pathway.
Wow.
So it's happening. So I don't think there's anybody who's going to argue with it too much.
Okay.
There's always somebody who has comments, but I think overall it'll be accepted. So we're not going backwards in the sense that we eliminated anything. We're not eliminating the 150. We're just adding the lesser opportunity. So anyway, this is the February financial statements, and it is actual. So we're doing better than we thought. The applications continue to expand. Our revenues are greater than they were before. If we look at the graph back here, or the applications for 2025, essentially went from 205 to 190, which is par for the course for January to February. It always kind of declines a little bit. But even though the applications went down, the sections went up. Sections went up from 110 additional sections month to month. So And then I look at a lot of the other stuff and look at NASBA's revenues from last year, the same thing. Essentially, the pipeline is growing. So even though we
That's what I
haven't
read.
enacted all those changes they want, the pipeline itself is actually growing. And from what I've gathered, that's essentially the historic trend. When the economy gets really good, pipeline falls off. When the economy gets bad, more people go back into accounting and things because they know they can get a job. So, and that's basically what's happening. So, there may overall be less volume of students in the total pie, but more of them are coming back to accounting as a, curriculum. So I think, as some of us postulated 2 or 3 years ago, is that by the time they get done with all of the posturing they're doing about how to increase the pipeline, the thing will hardly have solved itself. As all the things they talked about doing, it's been 2 or 3 years now, and most of them still haven't been done. So,
Yeah.
Much to do about little, I guess you could say, to some extent. But we're fine, and I know we'll have enough revenues to cover a 200,000 contribution and still stay within our budget.
Okay.
Overall, we're doing fine.
Is there
ma'am.
has there been any feedback from EOG or NASBA about EOG possibly doing the testing?
John, you want to address that, or?
Yeah, I could do that. So Dave and I met with, we have been meeting, and we met most recently this morning with Dr. Jones. And so Dr. Jones with EOG has been talking to NASBA and Prometric. And so it looks like the path they're going to be taking is UOG will be sort of taking over the existing testing center in a scaled down version from what the space they need, that they currently have, that is, to ensure sort of a seamless transition, given the limited amount of time left. So how they're working out the details, that's yet to be determined, but that's the approach that UOG would take over the existing testing center, and then ultimately, eventually, to transition to probably a venue at the university, because Prometric has all these specific requirements to address security of the testing center. That EOG may need some time. Now, David, this is where I'm not really sure. What is COG? Because that's the division within UOG.
It's our RCOG is the Research Corporation of Guam.
Okay.
That's what she was referring to, the RCOG.
Oh, RCOG. Okay, Research Corporation of Guam, because that would be the entity handling it on UOG's side, and because they won't be employees, because that would take forever. So I'm not sure exactly how that's going to work. They're able to just take it over without having to necessarily hire government employees.
Yeah, well, the RCOG, the RCOG, the Research Corporation of Guam, was created as a 501c3 nonprofit. That's an arm of the university per se, but it's an arm's length arm. So they can actually conduct activities through their nonprofit, the way I understand it. And they may even be for-profit entities, but they also can gain a lot of the grants. They do a lot of the grants. So they bring in the grants for providing research and things like that. They may require that, we create or UOG creates another nonprofit that would operate under their auspices. But that's how it would be operated as a non-Gov Guam entity per se.
Entity, right? Okay.
Yeah. So in that non-Gov Guam entity, then the employees would be it would be just like NASBA running the test center, but they'd be employees of that nonprofit that's operated under the auspices of the Research Corporation of Guam. That way they can they're enabled for doing things that are very difficult to do under a government agency per se. So
Okay.
there's several
I mean,
universities in the States I know that operate nonprofit entities under this same scenario.
same, right?
They're a nonprofit entity that has a for-profit business, kind of like NASBA does also with CPACE, et cetera. It's a separate division, and it's for-profit division, and it's taxed and everything, but it operates
Okay.
under the nonprofit overall.
Okay. I've emphasized to Dr. Jones, of course, the urgency to get this done in order to ensure that we don't, have a period of time with no testing center. So if the current testing center closes up to end of October, we'd like to see it continue. I mean, it is possible, depending how long it takes for them to secure this, it's possible we could have, a certain number of months without a testing center. I'm just already anticipating that and just need to somehow communicate that when it's determined.
Right. And at this point, we just need to, hasten the process of UOG looking at doing what it needs to do to make the thing happen.
Yeah, but Dr. Jones seems to be very motivated. So she says things are moving rapidly.
Yeah, she's motivated. She's met with, we've had some meetings with the Prometric guys, and then she went and met with Randy Young at the test center and discussed the physical space and what's possible and not possible in terms of scaling down and other things. And we're trying to get more information to help her make a decision in that regard. But she's very interested in getting something done and creating an entity that would be at least able to add some additional revenue to the School of Business. And she's also very focused on supporting the accounting programs. She had some other meetings with the people, the CPAS people from Japan and things that she said she's very excited about also, and that's supporting additional accounting students and their accounting curriculum in Japan. So I think she's supportive of us overall. I think that's a good thing, much more so than we've ever had before. So.
David, do you know if there's been some public announcement that NASBA's pulling out of Guam
Not
or closing
that I
or
know of.
no?
Not that I know of. I don't
Okay.
think
I mean,
anything's going out.
I haven't been telling anyone at least in my office or anywhere that testing center is
Yeah.
closing tests now.
No, I haven't either. So I'm sure NASBA will have to make an announcement eventually, but I'm not sure when. I'll ask Pat
Well, I mean, there'll
next
be
week when I
a lot
see
of
her.
upset people. They don't start telling them they're closing 2 months before they close.
Yeah, no, I think it'll be before that, but I'll ask Pat what their timeline looks like.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be
I think
suspicious if they have their notice to proceed and then they're looking up and you can't test past October.
Right. Well, I think they were mainly looking at, being sure that they've taken care of the staff or whatever they needed to do from an internal standpoint.
Oh yeah, that's right.
With the people here before they said anything, but I'm sure they'll come up with an announcement. But I'll ask Pat next week when I see her Monday or Tuesday.
Okay.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions about anything? Well, that's all I have at this point. Tomorrow I
Nothing
go
from
to
me.
Okay. Tomorrow I go to Dallas and attend the AICPA regional meeting, and then we're supposed to have a discussion about the new pathways, et cetera. And then next week, on Sunday, I go to Clearwater to attend the NASBA meeting, which goes through Wednesday. Then I'll come back on the 31st. Okay,
Okay. All right. I don't have anything else. If there's nothing else, can I hear a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Can I hear a second?
Second.
Second, thank you, Francis. Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Safe
Take
travels.
care.
Thank
Okay,
you. Bye, everyone.
thank you. Yeah,
Take care.
bye now.